In this video, I will be talking to you about the first step of validating your business idea, which is assumption testing. One of the first things you have to really understand about the process is that almost everything you have in mind right now is just an assumption. It's a hypothesis that needs to be tested. I'm sure you have heard of Lean Startup. If you haven't, go and read the book by Eric Ries. That's a very good starting point into entrepreneurship. But the idea is that we make a list of assumptions and we go out and test them before we build the business, so that we make sure that whatever we have in mind actually is true. And this way we increase the chances of success of the startup. And the way we do that is, first, obviously, we have to make a list of all the assumptions. I suggest you do that as a team. If you're working in a team, you sit down for a workshop and you make a list of all the assumptions you're making. There are different ways to do that, and I'm not advocating for either one of them. So I've listed the 4 most common ones, and I've attached links below the video so that you can take a look. The first one is to do the business model canvas and then derive assumptions from there, all the things you were assuming when you were putting it in. Another one is to use Lean Canvas instead. Some people prefer that. Then there is also a method outlined in Talking to Humans book, which is available online. And the fourth one is the method by David Bland. I'm not advocating any of the 4. Again, I think it doesn't really matter. The main idea is that you make as an extensive list of assumptions as you can. Don't worry, we're not going to go out and test all their 25, 30, however many you come up with. And their practical tip I can give you here is that, especially now in their times when we're switching more and more towards digital, you could use Miraboard for that, and I'll attach a link to that as well. In fact, in the last video in the series, I will show you a template Miraboard that I've put together for startup validation, and you could use our template for that as well. The next step is to rank all the assumptions we got, because there could be that many that obviously you cannot test every single one of them, but also it's very important to really prioritize. That's one of the things I see a lot happening with founders, is that it's very difficult for them to know what's more important. So this is one of their frameworks that really helps, and it's very simple. What we do is we rank assumptions, we assign every assumption 2 criteria. One is how critical it is to my success. Is it a make it or break it assumption? The most critical being, if that assumption does not hold, our business would never work out. So that's obviously something that you have to test first, right? And the second criteria is, how certain or not are we that this assumption is true? How much information and evidence do we already have? Usually people don't start from nothing. They you might have an understanding of the industry you're in, so you would know something about some assumptions, but it's very important to be very critical here, because oftentimes this is where things go wrong. Founders think that they know that the customers care about A or B or C, and they just disregard testing this assumption, and this is what actually makes the business fail. So that's very important to be critical about it. And once we've ranked all the assumptions, what we do, or what I suggest you could do, is set up an assumption tracker. And I have prepared a template for you as well, which you can use. It's also on the Miraboard, but it exists separately if you just want to use this. This one is quite straightforward. You first have their assumption that you're making, then you have importance and certainty scores on a scale of 1 to 5, 5 being the most important, critical, or 5 being the most uncertain. In a column D, it just adds them up. And then what you're going to do is to rank assumptions based on a combined score. And the idea behind it is that you first have to validate the most critical and certain ones, because if their assumption number 1 does not hold, then there is no point in validating the rest, because you need to rethink how you're actually approaching your business. Then if you're working on a team, you can assign a responsible person to that. In column F, you'd have a test. We'll talk later in the video about different ways to test, mainly about interviews and landing pages, but there are many other ways that I'll point you to. Then there is the result, whether it's invalidated, comments, and next steps. And you use this document as kind of a master to document to track your assumption testing. So we first make the list following one of the approaches suggested, then we rank the assumptions, and then we set up a tracker. And we can do all of that in Miro board, as I will show you in the last video in this series.